So, if you've only ever seen the Sam Raimi versions of the Evil Dead franchise, Evil Dead Rise is gonna be pretty different, at least in one way. But does that difference make it enjoyable? Two estranged sisters have their reunion cut short by the rise of flesh possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. So, the premise of the first two Evil Dead movies is that somebody reads from the Book of the Dead, either on purpose or accidentally not knowing what they're reading, and as a result, a demon comes and possesses someone in the group to then create havoc and devastation for all around. That's also the same basic premise of the 2013 Evil Dead reboot or remake, and it's also now the same basic premise of Evil Dead Rise. So at the core, these movies follow a very simple concept, but it's the execution that sets them apart. Evil Dead Rise is much more of a serious movie than Raimi's versions. The tone isn't goofy or slapstick or even humorous. And while there are some small nods to the original films, both visually and through dialogue, the majority of this film goes for the straight horror route, intent on showcasing torment, intense violence, and a ton of blood. The movie starts off with a sequence that's pretty gnarly, and then it flashes back a day where we meet this single mom and her three kids, and the mom's sister who comes for a visit. Now, the relationship between the sisters is a bit strained, creating some decent character tension and even awkward interactions. But we don't actually get too much story building or background with the sisters before the insanity ensues. And I like how the demon is released or called in this movie. It comes about naturally and it fits well with how the story has been established. When this begins to happen, the sound design, that's spectacular. In the theater that I was watching this in, I could hear the whispers and the screams as tortured and demonic noises would just travel through the speakers. They would move from the back right to the front left, and then just creating this very believable illusion of movement. And the sounds did this quite often throughout the movie, enveloping us so there was nowhere to escape. Something else that was outstanding with the sound design is that the movie used silence in a very unnerving manner. Silence would just abruptly quiet everything, and this helped to build a big sense of dread. Now, like in the 2013 Evil Dead, this one also plays up the musical stings when something pivotal is happening, or even about to happen. I'm not such a huge fan of that because it signals a jump scare or some large action, which then destroys any surprise. And even though there are a lot of moments in here that I think were designed to make us jump, I never did. But that's not to say that the story doesn't create an atmosphere of dread and uneasiness. There's a massive ominous tone and feeling throughout the majority of the movie. And once the narrative dives into the possession, it doesn't let up until the end. That intensity, it's wonderful, and it works to make this a very fun watching experience. Now, one of the huge differences between this movie and the original two Evil Deads is that our characters don't spend the majority of the movie just screaming and shouting at the top of their lungs. Yeah, they do scream, but their reactions are more grounded and in line with how you'd imagine. The characters, they're out of breath, gasping to catch some air because they just had a very unnatural interaction with a beloved family member, or times that they're just struggling to stay quiet on the off chance that some baddie might hear them. And all of this reduces the annoyance of just hearing that nonstop yelling, but it also works to build up the suspense and dread. And while there is terror to experience, it's all complemented by gruesome and visceral violence. More than once, I, along with the rest of the audience, we audibly gasped and cringed because of the imagery that was shown. And some of the brutality, it's standard and what you'd expect, like knife wounds or shooting injuries. But then we get the creativity of shards of glass, ponytails, even cheese graters. Now, if you're going into this movie hoping for a lot of gore, you're not going to be disappointed. There is a lot, and I mean a lot of blood that's employed. It actually reminded me of the bloodshed from that crazy Korean movie, Project Wolf Hunting. Now, in Evil Dead Rise, there have to be hundreds and hundreds of gallons of blood that's used, which then created some extremely cool visuals. And speaking of visuals, the effects, they're outstanding. Both special and practical effects help to create a massive sense of realism in what we see. And then when that's combined with some excellent makeup, we get creature designs that are nightmare fuel and just look to be straight from hell. Now, I love the effects that we see particularly in a character's eyes. These showcase small but noticeable changes when someone's possessed, and these don't make the person look goofy possessed, but terrifyingly evil possessed. Now, the movie's only 97 minutes long, and it feels like the perfect length. While there are small moments of downtime, or at least quiet, the pacing is deliberately driving and urgent. There's no time to get bored or even distracted. The story moves efficiently from element to element so that our butts stay puckered as the characters encounter their next demonic obstacle. Now, for me, I think the biggest drawback to this film is that it's not scary. I mean, it's intense, most definitely, and the visuals are horrifying, but I was never scared. Also, I'm kind of on the fence with the overall story. While it employs new character elements, the core of this is pretty much a rinse and repeat of those that have come before. And maybe that's not a concern for you, which is certainly fair enough. I mean, I don't think most people go into something like this looking for deep or complex storylines. They're just looking for gory violence and creative kills, which this definitely provides. So overall, Evil Dead Rise pays homage to its predecessors through visuals and dialogue, while also managing to include new character dynamics that have weight. The blood is recklessly spilled, creating a gore fest filled with chaos and torment. The effects are a definite high point, bringing a horrific realism to the violence. And while the overall story may not differ from the others in this franchise, the tight family dynamic is a nice touch and creates some emotional investment. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and then almost non-stop gory violence. I give Evil Dead Rise 3.5 out of 5 couches. So, are you a fan of the franchise? Let me know which one's your favorite in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.